welcome to the Box Home. We are so glad that you joined us today. We have a really great discussion question for us to talk about, and it is how to improve your communication. And so we have 3 practices that if you implement within your communication, within your marriage, things are just going to be so much smoother. And so they have done wonders in our marriage, and we cannot wait to share them with you and hear the stories of how they are helping in yours.
Yeah, so let's just get started. The very first practice is this. Set aside time for connecting conversations and necessary conversations. And like this is the thing that's probably helped us the most in our relationship is that we recognize that good communication rarely just happens. You have to be intentional, set up time for it to happen. Even if you're just newly married and you're spending all of your time together, you feel like, we're just always together and therefore good communication will happen. It doesn't. You have to set aside time for those intentional conversations. And we really have identified 2 types of conversations that it's good to set aside, ideally separate time for. The first is what we call connecting conversations. And these are conversations like, how are we doing? Or how are you doing? That's beyond just, how was your day? But kind of gets below the surface, gets on a heart level. How are you? Or dreaming conversations, planning down the road kind of stuff, or conversations about our kids or our faith. Good connecting conversations, we really enjoy those. And we have found that the best time to have those conversations are during a regular date night. So it's been a habit throughout our marriage to try to do that at least every other week. Ideally, every week we try to set aside time for a date night and have these kind of meaningful conversations.
There's some tensions that you will come up against, though, when it comes to setting aside time for a date night, and they're probably already running through your head. A couple of them that we have felt throughout our marriage. One is budget. Oftentimes it feels like it's just not in the budget to take a date night regularly.
Especially with kids and babysitters and stuff like that. Yeah.
And so we've just had to say it's important and we're going to do it and we're going to be creative. And so whether it be really cheap creative dates for at home or whether it be just grabbing a cup of coffee and going for a walk.
We do that a lot. That's a go-to for us.
We do that a whole lot.
Or snow cones. Big fans of snow cones.
Standing favorite. And then also just knowing that you can call on a good friend. And so one thing that we've been doing for years now is a date night swap where we have some good friends and one week out of a month, we put our kids down to bed and one of them will come over here and babysit so that we can go on a date and not have to pay a babysitter. And then one week they'll put their kids down to bed and one of us will go over there and babysit so they can do the same. And so get creative, but know that you can find a way in your budget.
To intentionally set aside time for those kind of connecting conversations.
Yeah. I would say just quickly, the other tension that we're up against that I know that many of you are too is littles that are difficult. And so whether that be a baby, whether that be, a kiddo that's having separation anxiety, and just want to encourage you to push through and know that your kiddo's going to be just fine. The babysitter or the friend can handle it. And in the long run, it's going to do wonders for that kiddo's security, knowing that you guys are good, that you're solid, and that you make time for each other. And so invest in that time.
Absolutely. Okay, we have one other type of conversation that we've identified that's really important to set aside intentional time for. We call it necessary conversations.
Yes, and those are conversations like budgeting or calendaring, even conflict resolution, those conversations that have to happen.
That suck.
They're not fun. And if you don't make time for them intentionally and proactively, then they're going to happen at the worst time. It's going to be in the heat of an argument. It's going to be a double booked calendar. It's going to be overspending on your budget.
When you get that overdraft fee.
Yes, those things are going to happen and those tensions are going to come. And so it's so important to set aside time. So I will say for the vast majority of our marriage, we have just had to decide there is a standing day in our week on our calendar. For us, it's Monday. And We just have it as our default thing on our calendar. We don't plan anything else on Monday nights. It is sacred to us. And we call it porch time. And that's just because we've learned the hard way that atmosphere is a big deal to us. And so sitting on the porch is a helpful atmosphere. And every week on a Monday night, you will find us on our porch talking about budget and calendaring, checking in on any conflict resolution type conversations that need to happen, and just making sure that we're making space for those important, necessary conversations.
To proactively have those necessary conversations, because again, necessary conversations happen. They'll always surface, and the choice is: do they surface in the heat of the moment, or can you be proactive about them? When we can be proactive about them, it sets us up to have good, healthy conversations around topics that are hard to talk about at times. So we highly recommend the intentional practice of setting aside time for these two types of conversations: meaningful conversations, or connecting conversations, and necessary conversations. The other thing on that too is that whenever you have a set aside time for necessary conversations, that keeps your date nights fun.
Yes, because you're not talking about budget on your date night.
Yeah, it's just the worst. So
conflict.
Again, that's why we recommend setting aside times for these two different types of conversations. Okay, second practice that we will recommend today is to pay attention to the 4 T's. And I got to give my mom all the credit here. She's the one who taught me these, but they really do wonders for our relationship and our communication whenever we're paying attention to these 4 things. So the 4 T's are this: timing, tone, tact, and truth. So timing, when is the best time to have certain conversations? Tone, of course, what's your voice sound like within that? Tact, how do you approach the conversation? Really, even what words are you going to use? And then truth, that you're bringing the truth to the table. You're not pulling any punches, but you're also being wise about how you're doing that.
Yeah, it's such a helpful grid to think through. When I know whenever we're about to have a weighty conversation or conflict resolution type conversation, I often try to think through that grid, and it helps so much when I'm considerate of the time and I'm thoughtful about my tone, and when I am thinking through my words.
Of course, we have lots of stories when we did not pay attention to the 4 T's. I have learned along the way that bringing up any kind of tension-filled conversations on the way to my parents' house,
not a good idea.
Not a good time, or right before we have a lot of people over to our house. Timing is not so great.
Yeah.
And Krista's learned that I care about what certain words she uses.
He does. Turns out the words that we use are important. And I learned about myself that I tend to exaggerate, especially when I'm emotional. And so I will throw out words like always and never, those definitive words. And he is very quick to remind me that those aren't true. I mean, it's not ever a never, it's not ever an always. And so instead of me saying you always or you never, choosing my words more carefully and saying oftentimes I find, or there seems to be a pattern, are helpful.
And I know that sounds dumb and I'm too persnickety, but it helps when you know each other and you can approach the conversations with tact. So again, paying attention to 4 T's. One underlying concept of this is the idea of just being a student of your spouse. I think of 1 Peter 3:7 that says, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding manner. And that's what we're husbands called to do, to know our wives. And part of knowing our wives well is knowing when is the best time to talk to them, or what tone of voice to use, and how to approach the conversation, your tact, and all that stuff. And so really encourage you to make the commitment to be a student of your spouse and to pay attention to the 4 T's. Also on that, let me just say that if you find that in your conversations, you just can't seem to have healthy dialogue, and then we would really recommend you see a counselor. And we think that is so helpful to help you learn how to have healthy communication. So no matter how hard you try, you just feel like, man, we never can have healthy communication. Let that be a catalyst to say, hey, let's go get some help, and have a third party helping you learn how to interact with each other. It's really a good thing. There's also a great program we'd recommend for that's called Reengage. And you can go to the website marriagehelp.org and find the closest re-engage program to you. It's a great program that has done wonders to help couples, no matter how bad they would say their marriage is, to be able to really find health and flourishing in their marriage. So we'd recommend that. So, okay, so those first two practices, the first is set aside intentional time for connecting conversations, and then those necessary conversations. The second is pay attention to 4 T's, and then the third is
practice number 3, which might be the most important, which is listen before you speak.
Yeah.
And y'all, it is just so easy to stop listening, and so many problems start rising up in marriages when we stop listening to the other person, and instead we're just in our heads thinking about our next argument or the next point we're going to make. Or when we stop assuming the best in our spouse and start assuming negative intent or assuming the worst. And in James 1:19, it says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." And so we really want to take that principle to heart, take that verse to heart. And so I just want to say, one thing that's been really helpful for me in this, not just training myself to stop and listen before I speak, but also recognizing that I bring 2 filters to every conversation with Jake. One of them is a filter of my insecurities, and another are any underlying frustrations. And those may not have anything to do with him, but I certainly bring them into a conversation, and they filter what he's saying to me. And so if I'm not aware of those filters, then he's saying things to me and I am assuming his meaning. And so when I'm simply stopping, choosing to listen, recognizing that I have these filters with me all the time, it teaches me just to stop and ask clarifying questions. And so if we're in a conversation and I'm hearing him and it sounds crystal clear that this is what he means, for me to be wise would say, okay, I know I have filters. And so Jake, when you said this, it caused me to feel this way. Am I hearing you right? Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
And ask.
Yeah, when we come to a conversation, we're usually way more concerned about saying what we want to say than hearing what the other person has to say. And so just choosing to say, okay, I'm going to be committed to listening first, to being a good listener, it really does wonders for your communication in your marriage. Another thing that helps on this topic is to help you listen well is to remove distractions.
Yes.
And so if we carry distractions with us everywhere we go, with our phone or on our watch or wherever, whatever, or kids, we birth them. And so, again, to go back to the first practice of setting aside intentional time for good communication, in that time, also remove the distractions. It will help you be able to listen well. Yeah. All right, friends, so those are the 3 practices that we highly recommend to help improve your communication within your marriage. We have 2 little assignments for you off of this. The first is we really encourage you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And the reason why that's important is because we think that these videos will give you a topic to be able to talk about each week. And so because meaningful connecting conversations are helpful for your marriage, these videos will give you a chance to do that. So subscribe and you'll get these each week. The second little assignment for you here is to talk with your spouse about identifying a time for you to have a connecting conversation. Perhaps if you already have a date night plan, you might also want to plan a time to have a necessary conversation that's separate from that date night. But find a time on your calendar this week for y'all to have a connecting conversation. All right, friends. Thanks for watching this video. We love you guys. Take care.
Bye.